But in those days, the closed hold was not so good. Let's just say that.
So I'm going to use that to transition now to the slightly controversial subject of smooth versus standard, or standard versus smooth. From a explaining to students perspective, I often say, there's international standard and there's American smooth. And in both, you have waltz, tango, foxtrot, Viennese waltz. We add a Peabody occasionally in American smooth, and we add the quick step in international standard. International standard, you got to stay in hold and you got to stay in frame the whole time. American, we can break it up. We can make it jazzy. We can make it feel Broadway, Hollywood. From a foundational perspective, from a first year of instruction, speaking solely from a competitive perspective, because from a social perspective, we change a whole bunch of rules. We break a lot of rules. But if you were taking a competitive student that came in and said, I have a long-term goal of I want to make championships, I want to make finals. First year, do you teach your students anything different between smooth or standard, or is it pretty much the same foundations across the board?
Well, okay, so I should have really said that at the very beginning of this interview that my opinions that I express are purely my own.
Yeah.
So even though I am registered with the NDCA and I am a member of the USISTD and NADTA, and also I'm an examiner, as you mentioned, with DVIDA, I do not represent any of those organizations. So what I'm about to say is what I purely believe myself. So we know that 2 or 3 years ago that a whole load of rules were applied, new rules were implemented by the NDCA when it comes to bronze and silver pro-am competitions for smooth. And as you know, you have to dance in closed hold for a minimum of 4 bars of music at the very beginning of each dance, and then you have to have a minimum of, I think it's 50% enclosed within the first minute of music.
It's 12, an additional 12 bars for the first minute.
Yes, thank you. You're correct.
It's only because I have had that memorized for the last year once that rule came into effect.
You can argue that when a smooth bronze waltz competition is on the floor, that judges are looking at who has the best closed hold, not only best closed hold, but best closed movement and all the rest of it. So is it really a smooth competition or is it standard competition? I know that after those 4 bars, you can open up and do things, but I know there was a lot of concern that judges would initially be marking on the closed hold work like we would in standard and not on the smooth. So that is a little bit controversial. I think I can understand the importance of making sure that people do have good closed work in smooth. I don't know that you should have to start out with it. I think maybe you have to maybe dance 12 bars, for example, throughout the minute of the routine, and not necessarily start out with it. I don't know. But I think it's good to emphasize basics. I think it's good to emphasize fundamental actions because smooth does come from closed hold. And I remember when I first came to the United States, the very first competition I attended was in 1989, California Star Ball. And it's the first time I was exposed to American Smooth. And I was there in the evening, I remember, because Igor and Irina Suvorov were still amateurs at that time and had just moved to the United States. So this is going back a long time ago. And anyway, so I was watching the Open Smooth, and I have to be honest with you, I was not very impressed at all. And partly that was due to the fact that closed hold was not like it is now. So you see the top couples in Smooth now, and their closed hold is very, very good. You look at Nick and Victoria, and their standard portion of their Smooth is quite at a high level. It's quite lovely to watch. But in those days, the closed hold was not so good. Let's just say that. So I think closed hold is important. And of course, nowadays, we have the rule we have to abide by when it comes to bronze and silver Smooth. Going back to a question, if I was training someone for a competition in Smooth, obviously want to make sure that you adhere to the rules and regulations, but I'd also keep the routine relatively simple. Just have a long and a short side and repeat again. And it's better to focus on that than, 3 or 4 long sides and a very long routine. You don't need that. The judges only will be looking at you for a relatively small period of time, assuming that there are other competitions on the floor. So they have very little time to assess. So even if you repeat halfway through the floor, halfway around the floor, that is fine. Mm-hmm. Again, I think quality over quantity is very, very important. And, when you have maybe like a hand-to-hand, back-to-back or something in waltz in bronze, again, just keep it very clean, keep the styling very readable. You don't have to do anything exotic with the arms for the time being. You can always add that. So I think, it's like building a foundation. You've got to get the foundation right. So just having a bare skeleton of the routine where you have all the necessary elements that you're showing to the judges, where you can dance it well, where I will always remember this, and this is going to sound very pessimistic. One of the coaches that I went to when I was an amateur was called Brian Allen. And Brian said to me, the least offensive couple on the floor wins.
Kimberly and I were just talking about this last week.
Really, yeah. The least offensive couple on the floor wins, because judges are they're searching for mistakes. And that's what we do as a coach. We're looking for errors all the time. So the fewer that you can make, the more likely that you will do well. Mm-hmm. So just by having that kind of just simple routine, dance very, very well, I think is much better than trying to have some over-choreographed routine with advanced stylings, which are not going to look too good. So, and I advise that for all the dancers, for sure.